Greetings, friends. Operational situation at the front on the 16th of February. We will start briefly with the Skupinsko-Limenski section of the front. We will talk about Bakhmut, about Avdeevka of course, and the Avdeevka direction. There is a lot of news from this direction and the South Donetsk section of the front, as well as very important interesting news. According to the Kupiansk-Limenski route, all attacks were repulsed in the area of Sinkovka. Russian troops attempted both north of Skovka and attempts to bypass the west and east with small infantry groups without any changes. We haven't talked about Starch-Tubevka for a long time, but here everything turned into positional fighting. That is, on the Russian side, offensive operations are also periodically carried out by small infantry groups. Attempts to disperse the forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, but the situation is more complicated for them than they expected, because the armed forces of Ukraine reacted quickly and did not allow them to approach Berestovoy and Peshino, so we do not fix any changes. At the same time, if we talk about the main pressure, here, the enemy is also making more attempts to advance west of Tebeyevka, that is, across the river, to the dominant heights, and at the same time, attempts to bypass the same heights north of Tebeyevka, that is, between Kotlyarovka, Tebeyevka along the road. This is the main area where he really still presses, but it is possible again to repel most of the attacks. As for the Lyman direction, a lot of messages continue to come, a lot of misinformation, as you can see. In the open information field, it means that the main military operations are still going on in the area of Yara Lapteva and Yara Middle. At the same time, there were attempts, as we have said, to approach the distant Yar. We managed to repel attacks from one of the forest belts, and we do not record any new changes. At the same time, the main tactic here, of course, is to play attrition. In other words, it is just the same to carry out these assaults, both in small infantry groups and with the support of armored vehicles, in order to find a slack, then find a gap in the defense of the AFU. And of course, the bet is that there are problems with artillery ammunition. The enemy, the Russian troops on Bologorovka and Serebryansky Forest, are doing this without any changes. Now we will pass along the Bakhmut direction, only along the Ivanovo one. It means that the assault operations are continuing. The enemy is very seriously approaching to attack Ivanovo itself. We have already said about it that its vector is changing, while the scattering blows and battles near Bogdanovka continue. So, according to the latest information, the enemy has minimal advances. This is about 100 to 200 meters in the direction of Ivanovo to the north, so this is the first moment. As for the East Ivanovo, the situation remains to be further clarified, according to how the fighting is going, but, I think by the evening, I will publish more or less the situation that exists on the map in my telegram. This is according to the reports, that there are about 100 to 200 meters there. As for eastern Ivanovka, the fact that the fighting continues along the section of the road that 0504, this is one moment, but still the enemy is trying to improve the tactical situation west of Bakhmut, in the direction of Ivanovsko, that is, south of Stavka. Well, the conditionally allocated region is betting on it. That is, to approach Ivanovo itself, with a wide coverage, as much as possible, in order to try to carry out assault actions. At the same time, there is an activity of eastern ticks, in the cinema. It is more positional in nature, like everything that eastern Avdeevka. Therefore, we do not record any significant changes. The only thing that I will publish a little later in the telegram is that there are 100 or 200 meters, as one of the fighters reported, where the enemy really has progress. We turn to the Avdeevka direction. It remains difficult, hot, and really critical for us. A lot for today, just the same day. I would even say that the fighters began to publish the situation from the night. The situation is extremely difficult, as you understand, and in fact critical, as stated by a lot of different contradictory data comes. Officially speaking, everything is controlled. If we talk about what the fighters directly say from the field, well, everything is completely the opposite. There is such a thing. Let's follow the changes. The northern flank. There are assault actions in the direction of fire station number 13, so there were a number of messages from the enemy. That since the night, by the way, that they managed to capture the fire station. In any case, we did not receive visual information about it. The only thing they managed, the information they have, is to improve the tactical position between the intersection of the road section He-0542 Industrial Avenue and the positions of the western dachas. Here, in a section up to 470 meters wide, we have really advanced to a depth of 250 meters. And at the same time, yes, there are assault actions both in the direction of fire station number 13 and in the direction, well, let's say conditionally, along the trenches that are along the road section. It is 0542, south of Avdeevsky Koksakim. In other words, the enemy took one of the mainstays yesterday, and today, of course, from yesterday to today, is making further attempts to improve the tactical situation. For a number of sites, naturally, information comes late, as you understand, so everything remains on further clarification, despite the marked progress. As for Lastocken, there was also a lot of information that Russian troops were conducting further assault operations in the direction of the settlement along one of the forest belts. This corresponds to reality, as well as in the direction of the bad beam. So they are trying to approach as much as possible. But, if we are talking about the bad beam, to the section of road leading to the chemist district, he is the 9th quarter. And as for Lastocken, this is an attempt, I would say, no longer at the settlement itself, given the forces with which the enemy is advancing, and then the attempt will be to the north, respectively, to attack again in the direction of the road section. It is 0542, in order to maximally approach the positions south of Avdeevsky as Sohim. But this is my opinion. Active hostilities are continuing now. How the denouement will be, we will already look at the fact. There are very, very difficult battles going on now. As for the metal products factory, the enemy continues to carry out assault actions from the station lane, including attempts to bypass along Industrial Avenue, and accordingly, assault actions are also taking place along Hero Street. Very heavy fighting. At the same time, as for the alley of the 50th anniversary of Avdeevsky Koksakim, part of it remains in the gray zone. There are, I would say, more positional fighting, although forces from the Russian troops are also involved quite large in this sector of the front. Well, first of all, they assume that there may be attempts to break through on the part of the Apu in this sector of the front, but secondly, it should be added that the defense of the Apu, as far as possible, it still holds on this sector of the front. Moving on. Yesterday on the evening broadcast, I told you that I had no information at all about the Garden Association and the filter station by the evening. That is, there was no information at all. Today, unfortunately, information from the enemy is already coming with visual confirmation. They managed to capture the Donetsk filtration station, and here they advanced in a section up to 195 kilometers wide, to a depth of 700 meters. The situation for yesterday, the situation for today. But, if we proceed from the information, as I myself conduct analytics, when it arrived, when it stopped. Yesterday, they managed to enter, and, accordingly, today they planted their flag. These are mercenaries from Abkhazia. Tag. There is such a moment. And now, of course, the enemy will increase pressure on the forest plantation, respectively, in the direction of Avdeevka itself. Attempts to bypass a number of positions where it was possible to stop Russian troops before the industrial zone. Now they will try to naturally bypass the game. Well, we will look at the development of the situation. It is very, very difficult, due to the fact that, well, as if the enemy now has a slight advantage in the form of landing, along which he will advance. Although, I will also say, that it will not be possible to simply advance. There are also a lot of surprises ready, as the fighters themselves reported. Additionally, mining was also carried out, and so on, in order to stop the enemy's advance as much as possible. Therefore, they will naturally attack, but I hope, in any case, there will be no rapid progress. Well, clarifications have been added. This is according to yesterday, so yesterday on the evening broadcast, we moved the Zenit fortified area to the red zone, and yesterday on the evening broadcast, I told you that there is information that they attacked along the road, so most likely also the red zone, but on clarification. But in fact, both the Cheburashka fortified area and the Vineyards to Garden partnership were taken by that time, so natural information is updated later. So the situation for yesterday, the situation for today. Here, the enemy managed to advance in a section up to 1.8 kilometers wide to a depth of up to 700 meters. Approximately this is with the clarifications already. Now, naturally, the fighting is going in the direction, if we are talking from the south, in the direction of the Chemist district, the 9th quarter, because if we talk about those shots that come from the enemy. Now there are rolls around the area of intersections and fortified area at the T-shaped intersection. This is the first direction. The second, of course, is in the direction of the Chemist district itself, the leading road from the south. That is, attempts are also being made to advance along it. Naturally, there is a fortified area in the north. Naturally, they are ready to repel attacks there, but you need to understand that the main bet, and I emphasize this, I emphasized it, I allocated it to you on all previous broadcasts. Today, I repeat, the number of air bomb strikes. That is, no matter how equipped the position is, you must understand that there is a very large number of strikes. If we talk about yesterday, we stated yesterday that there are 40 or more, that is, the number of aerial bombs is increasing. To date, there has already been a message that this is 60 for yesterday. In other words, the number of air bomb attacks increased by 50% compared to the previous day. That is, it's just a huge amount, so that you understand, it's flying. And these are not 250, and even not 500 anymore, they are mostly 1.5 tons. So the situation is extremely difficult. That's why our media resources publish videos from the enemy side, namely bomb attacks, so that everyone understands perfectly how difficult it is, and why this situation is. Because, not only the enemy is superior in artillery, ammunition, manpower, but also in tactical aviation. This naturally plays a very, very serious role. So I have indicated the vector to you along the south, along Rashevsky Street, along Soborno Street. There are attacks on this area, respectively, and on the neighboring fortified area, from positions to the south. So between the experimental and Zenit fortified area from the Donetsk filtration station in the western direction, that is an attempt to bypass a number of positions of the AFU. And the situation with the Garden Association south of Kamenka, it is as I told you yesterday on the evening broadcast. I have no information. Today I have no information in the same way. There is a contradictory one that is being received, but it is contradictory, because there are active hostilities going on there now. Well, this corresponds in any case, to the fact that the enemy is really carrying out assault operations on this sector of the front, but their results, whether they manage to enter the territory of the Garden Association, it is unknown. As for Avdeevka as a Sahim, there is one more point I want to comment on, and let's move on. We also have a lot more information on the front. So, just the same bet on aerial bombs, it shows that, first of all, Avdeevka as a Sahim is not Mariupol. Not Mariupol as of steel, this is the first moment. The plant is actually yes, it has already been destroyed, that is, everything that could have been broken, it is broken. Now there is a finishing of the comparison with the ground. In other words, the enemy is playing to prevent, well, conditionally, the same development as we had as of steel, due to the number of air bomb strikes. Therefore, now there is pressure on him, so that there is no defense, and in fact this is the final point, as he plans to put in Avdeevka, on Avdeevka as Sohimi. And at the same time, a very important point is that they are concentrating forces between the experienced and the water, which I have been complaining about for the third day, that they will most likely try to attack in the direction then I said the 9th quarter. But then with a change in the vector of the enemy's attacks, his advance along the forest belts west of Avdeevka, most likely just at this then they will try to advance. Although before the APU, it should be emphasized, it was possible to stop, and quite large assault armored vehicles of the enemy, between the northern and fortified area. As it will be now, we will look at the situation. In any case, the enemy is planning, and there is a lot of talk about this, which can hit. There is such a moment. This is our situation, extremely difficult and difficult. As for the typical one, we do not fix any changes. Well, we move on to Nevelskaya Pervomeskaya. On May Day, we said that the fighting continues, the assault actions by the enemy, along the street Porsche Travneva. A situation with varying success. They also talked about concentrating. As you remember, I probably bothered you a lot with this information, that south of Pervomesky, Vostoknonovelsky forces, in order to level the front line, strike in the direction of Pervomesky. He then managed to align the front line along one of the roads. Well, we further said with you that there will be attempts, because it is probing the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. Well, approximately in this area, there were attempts to advance. It was possible to repel the attack, but now he has changed the vector a little, due to the fact that there are forces, and there is an effective defense on the part of the defense forces in the direction of Pervomesky. That is, between Pervomesky and Novelsky, they have changed the vector so to the west. That is, an attempt, I would say, to bypass Nevelskaya from the south, or to approach it closely, and then strike in a northerly direction. In this sector of the front, we record the advance in a section up to 1.5 kilometers wide, to a depth of up to 400 meters, from the neighboring fortified area to the fortified area that was previously in the gray zone. Therefore, the situation looks like this. This is precisely due to the fact that they are concentrating forces, which we talked about, that we need to understand, that these will also be assault operations, and naturally they are aimed at advancing. And of course, the number of aerial bombs, the amount of ammunition, with the fact that they do not have an artillery problem with them. It plays not only an important, key role here. Difficult situation. At the same time, a number of experts after this advance, literally there in the last hour, expressed the opinion that they might even try to bypass Krasnogorka, because it is a city larger than Marenko herself, more ready to defend than Marenko. So it is unlikely that they will storm it head-on, as I have also said before, but they may try to circumvent it. But, I would say this is so long-lived, that today, it makes no sense to talk about it at all. Here first of all, there is the question of Pervomeskaya, Nevelskaya, to hold the defense, in order to prevent them from advancing, and bypassing there, connecting. Now we turn to the South Donetsk and Kurikovsky directions. So, we do not record any significant changes in the Kurikovsky direction. Active fighting continues in the eastern part of Georgievka. And as for Novomikhailivka, we managed to push it somewhere, as I will state yesterday. In other words, the situation is dynamic. In short, the situation remains dynamic in this sector of the front. Because there are a lot of attempts, and indeed an enemy appears within the gray zone, Academician Timiryazov Street, in the direction of the industrial zone, the intersection with the road to the cemetery, it manages to discard him. He manages to move somewhere along the northern streets again and discard him, so the situation remains dynamic. Fights with varying success, I would say so. This is exactly why the enemy was successful, and then everything stopped. I said it yesterday, and I will repeat it today. That's just the same against the background of the fact that the pressure of tactical aviation is increasing with bombs on Avdeevka itself and their use. The number of their use in neighboring areas is decreasing, and this has just led to the fact that it is possible to restrain the enemy, although the pressure on his part is also very serious. Well, I will comment on one more point, although I already thought I would not have to return. Orkhov direction, Zaporozhye section of the front. The fact that yesterday one of the scouts also reported to the official media space that the group is quite large, concentrated. So according to the logs, well, of course Vasilyevka is from the enemy, and he most likely can proceed to large-scale offensive actions. Well, conditionally we will speak as Avdeevka, yes, in the direction of the city of nuts. Here it is actually with us. Look, there are different opinions. I would say the enemy. Now, I don't see him advancing against the background of how his tactical aviation is being used, and the fact that he understood the reality that exists on the battlefield. Therefore, it can occur only after Avdeevka. But this is my opinion. Yes, I'm not saying that everything is fine, so we don't need to worry there and so on. Probably, they still know better scouts. Naturally, if Avdeevka falls, it is likely that this direction can be active. Maybe yes, although there is also the Bakhmut direction, the Yarskaya clock. Offensive actions will be carried out at the Yar hours, they will strengthen plus the Ivanovo, plus the Kopinski direction, the Lebanese. I would say more in my opinion. They can be active there. But there is still such a moment that the enemy can act not on one sector of the front, but on several actively. But here everything will depend on the number of tactical aircraft on his part. This probably will be the key factor that affects their further offensive. If they end up with Avdeevka, they are relieved, well, taking into account the fact that they have increased the number of air bomb strikes by 50% in just one day. You understand that the number of tactical aircraft involved has become more in that sector of the front, not by 50%, but by some amount increased. Naturally, the number of combat sorties of existing aircraft has increased, and in addition, naturally, they could additionally apply this in other areas, but now everything is tied up with Avdeevka. On the left bank of the Dnieper, we do not record any changes. Well, we turn briefly to a very important news background. The first is that the US House of Representatives